Summit County, I'm Dave Rossi. Welcome to County Connection. With me today are my three friends, Commissioners Tamara Poe, Josh Blanchard, and Elizabeth Lawrence. And we are going to kick it off today with a lot of topics, including budget discussions, what's going on with affordable housing projects, how Camp Hale and the National Monument designation will impact Summit County, and a lot more. So let's kick it off with Elizabeth.
Hi. Thanks, Dave. Well, last week, the president came to visit. He actually went over to Camp Hale in Eagle County, and he declared Camp Hale and surrounding areas the Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument. This includes part of the 10-mile range in Breckenridge, or from Frisco to Breckenridge, and then encompasses Quandary Peak, which is the most visited 14er in the state of Colorado. Really exciting. At one point, this was part of the CORE Act. It still is. We still hope the CORE Act passes in the Senate. But what the president did is go ahead and make this a national monument to provide further protections. So what comes next, there will be more something solidified at Camp Hale. It's going to probably have a visitor center, etc., allow people more access. And what that means for us in the 10 mile is really just further protections down the road. It's not going to stop recreation or access. That's not it. It's really actually set aside as a national monument so that people continue to have access. What it's really going to do for us is hopefully provide more funding, or it definitely will. We have lots of wildfire mitigation projects all across Summit County, and to allow that part to be in a national monument that would be taken care of from that standpoint, and then further leverage our funds in the rest of the county certainly would be a huge bonus. So we're looking forward to working with the Forest Service, the federal government, as they lay out the plans for the national monument.
So they will actually develop a national monument plan with public input.
Yes.
And it does mean that the opportunities for recreation will actually continue and be protected, which is probably why the ski areas were so supportive, as were all of our partners across.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would say this national monument is really based in recreation to make sure that those soldiers that trained at Camp Hale, that now that area is used for recreation, continues in perpetuity. It's also a way to honor the ancestors of that land, the Ute Indians. They're going to have a big emphasis on that, which is great. As well as how the outdoor ski recreation economy really came from Camp Hale. And it ended up spurring 60 ski areas across the U.S., which is really exciting. So they recognize that our tourism industry is robust, and want to make sure that this is protected and taken care of, and make sure that people can get outside and enjoy it.
It's a fantastic place of history over at Camp Hale, and it's an exciting development for our community. So congratulations on that.
Yeah.
So talk about what else you've been doing as far as working with our federal elected officials on other projects, such as housing, and helping us get more funds from the government to move those projects forward.
Yes, well, all of us got what's called American Rescue Plan funds. We made a strategic decision in Summit County to invest that funding in housing. That's our number one need. It's blaring in our face. We're doing a ton in housing. I think it's important for folks to understand we do a lot in housing. Saying all that, we need to do more, and we needed funding. So we invested all of our ARPA funds into funding. I'll let Commissioner Pogue talk about those details, but I went to the White House, was able to present and talk about, look, we invested our federal dollars into housing, and in turn, most likely we're going to end up housing some federal employees with this joint project over in the town of Dillon that we're doing with the Forest Service. It's really interesting. I'll let Tamara talk about that, but we just wanted to let them know housing is our biggest need. So here we're taking something and investing back in our workforce and our community. There's tons of ARPA projects across the country. Lots of people are doing different things, but we are doing what we feel is really most important here, and that's housing. Now, is there a next step in the future? Yes. You're going to be hearing lots from us in the coming months to talk about how we can raise that federal AMI limit and make sure that we can get even more federal funds for housing. But this was a great first step. It was an honor to be at the White House, talk about housing, Camp Hell, lots to talk about CDL, how that impacts states that have recreational marijuana, what those restrictions are, and how the White House is starting to hear a lot about that. So.
Great. Well, in a future segment, you'll have to tell us what you bought from the gift shop at the White House.
Absolutely nothing. They did give me 3 Hershey's Kisses that are wrapped in the White House.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. So we went through a big budget process this week to kick off Summit County's budget. Elizabeth just mentioned housing, which is a big component of that. Can you walk us through, Tamara, what exactly we've got in our budget for affordable housing?
Sure. Budgets really tell the story of priorities. And so for this BOCC, for our entire community, housing is the priority. In our draft budget last week, we allocated $20 million for various housing projects. I do think that is, first of all, that's a combination of dedicated revenue, right, our sales tax for housing, and also our general fund contributions, in addition to what Elizabeth just talked about, our ARPA funds. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 projects that we're going to fund for next year.
Just got that off the top of your head,
Just got that off the top of my head, yeah. In fact, there are so many projects that I can no longer do it off the top of my head, which I'm actually very excited about. So first up, we have a joint partnership with Colorado Mountain College and the town of Breckenridge. That's a $6 million commitment from us. And the idea here is that when CMC builds their first building for their students, the town of Breck and Summit County government are going to build a second building. So that will really double the capacity. That will be housing that is primarily for that has some units for folks that are graduating and are going to stay in public sector jobs. And then, as we usually do with our housing, it'll also open up more units for the community as a whole. So we're very excited about that one. I think we're breaking ground on it any minute now.
It's coming up.
So that one will move pretty quickly. The second one is about $4 million for the U.S. Forest Service partnership that we're doing right next to the town of Dillon. The first piece of that is really fixing that intersection. And so the idea is to put a smaller roundabout just by the exit from Highway 6 onto Tenderfoot. So that one, I think, will have about 162 units, all rentals, primarily lower income rentals. We're excited about that one. We are also hoping to be able to partner with Centura Health on a partnership. That's about $3 million. We will keep doing deed restrictions through Housing Helps. That's about $2.5 million. Next up, we have a Wintergreen Phase 2 development. So many of you know we already worked with Gorman and Vail Resorts to build Wintergreen Phase 1. Now we're going back and we're adding additional density to that project. So that's about $700,000. We're continuing to work on our hotel conversions and our leases. So we have about $600,000 designated for that strategy. We continue to move forward with our STR long-term rental incentive conversion program. We'll talk more about that specifically later, but that's about $500,000. We're excited that we're finally going to roll out our accessory dwelling unit grant program next year. It's another $500,000. That will help folks build ADUs on their already existing properties, primarily locals who might not be able to have the property to put an ADU, but might not be able to afford that ADU.
So an ADU is like a carriage garage or an apartment above a garage.
An extra unit on a property, basically, that can be made available for rent to locals once they're built. Lake Hill, we're going to move forward with entitlements next year. That is a huge step forward. It has been a long time.
I'm sorry, can we pause?
Too long.
Can we pause? Did you just say we're moving forward?
We are moving forward with Lake Hill. Right? So we'll be working on all of the zoning changes next year that need to happen. That's a process called entitlements. And it has been too long to get to this point, but we're incredibly excited to see that. And then we will wrap up our Justice Center parcel development. So that is, oh boy, I'm going to forget how many units.
52.
52, thank you, Elizabeth. 52 units right next to the Justice Center. We do have to have a rename of that project. But our units will be in the factory. They're modular units. They'll be in the factory in March. So we're excited to see that one move forward as well.
And that's a partnership with Town of Breckenridge.
It is,
and
yes.
It looks like, as I drove by the other day, it looks like they've cleared the lot. They're getting ready to break ground on that project really soon.
Yeah,
so that's exciting.
When the units are built in the factory in March, They hopefully will be delivered in June, and then we can do, all the site prep is done ahead of time. So they literally just put those units on the parcel, and then we do all the hookups and finalizing the electrical and all that kind of stuff of the unit. And the hope is that by the end of next year, all those units will be ready for folks to move into.
That's
So it's
fantastic.
exciting. Yeah.
The three of you actually went down to visit the factory where these are built down
Yep.
in Buena Vista. That looked like a pretty exciting day for you guys.
Yeah, we had a really good time.
yeah.
We learned a lot, and there's been a lot of coverage about Fading West, which is the modular factory in Buena Vista. They've got this really cute little neighborhood in BV, and hopefully our neighborhood looks just as cute.
That's
I
fantastic.
think we can take this for a field trip. I think Brad will want to go.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yes.
really cool. Because we were able, he says yes, so we were able to see Telluride,
Yep.
some workforce housing units that Telluride's building. That's what we were looking at as we were there. So we can certainly go in March and take the camera. It is so cool how it's done.
Yep. And this will actually be one of the first modular apartment buildings that Fading West has done. So actually, I think the first. So it'll look a little different than some of the stuff that they've done before, but modular makes everything faster and more affordable. So we're excited about that.
It's a long time coming.
Yes,
so
indeed.
we'll be posting pictures of you guys in hard hats from that excursion. I wasn't there because I don't look good in a hard hat. So let's talk about next step in the budget. Josh, we have a lot of funds. One of them is Strong Futures. Can you talk a little bit about what's encompassed in that and how those revenues from the Strong Futures Fund are spent and what we're actually spending them on?
Absolutely. So as we've mentioned, we just started our 2023 budget process. And so what we did at our last board meeting is we basically approved the draft budget, but it is an ongoing process that will continue through the fall. And we'll continue to talk about all of the different funding sources and revenue streams, and then what investments that will really impact Summit County. To tomorrow's point, budgets tell stories, and our story is really about housing and the broader picture of how to support supporting our community. So the Strong Futures Fund, of course, was a ballot initiative back in 2018 that really allowed the locals to vote on this for more investment in some key areas in our community, which included recycling, it included wildfire, it included mental health, behavioral health, capital projects as well, and childcare.
Right.
And so 5 key areas that are important for our community. I'll talk a little bit about some of our Strong Future capital projects and how we're laying that out in the next year. Many people know that our search and rescue program here in Summit County is one of the most active search and rescue programs in the country. We've talked a lot about how over the last few years, folks have come to Summit County to take advantage not only of our forests, but of course the 80% of federal lands that encompass Summit County. And so our search and rescue team really needs to have an improved facility so that they can do training. And it really, what is required in Summit County is so diverse because we have year-round recreation, we have water, we have forests, we have mountains. And so our search and rescue team is long overdue for improvements to our search and rescue building. So that's one big capital investment that we'll be making. We've talked a lot about Summit County's commitment to our library systems, and we've just officially broken ground on our North Branch Library. I know, Elizabeth, this is something you're particularly passionate about. You've been a part of this for a long time coming. And so that will continue to provide those expanded services to our community members, kids for after-school programs and weekend programs. Just a really great expansion taking place in North Branch, which is in Silverthorne. We're making some adjustments and expansions to our landfill operation here in Summit County. It's actually a pretty remarkable facility.
Yeah, it is.
To go up there and take a look. So we're getting expanded offices, expanding MRF, as well as a scale house. So all of the recyclables and landfill materials that come in, we can do a better job for that. So again, when we talk about providing services to our community, that is a service that a lot of folks don't think about, the responsibility for county government, and we're going to make some improvements, much needed improvements there. And then the last thing I'll just mention is improvements to our shooting range here in Summit County. Again, a unique set of circumstances where Summit County government has operational aspects and control over our shooting range. We want to make some improvements there as more people have come into Summit County to take advantage of the free range, plus increased training for our first responders that use the training. We want to make it a little bit, make some improvements there, particularly for the neighborhoods that are adjacent to the shooting range. So some good improvements there. So lots of capital improvements that Summit County residents can look forward to in the coming months and into next year.
What I like about these, Josh, is that we've talked about housing, we've talked about expansion of the library, we've talked about the landfill. What I like here is that these really do fit in with your goals, and strategy for this BOCC has really been to address housing, address childcare, work on sustainability. So these things, this budget seems to encompass your strategies pretty succinctly this year.
It does, and again, going back to supporting our working families, our workforce here in Summit County, also our seasonal residents, our second homeowners. This really improves the quality of living, we feel like, in a variety of different areas. Again, it's taxpayer dollars. We're wanting to invest it responsibly. Fiscal responsibility is one of our key goals and one of our key values as Summit County government, and we feel good about the direction that we're going with our budget.
That's great. Well, great. Coming up in segment 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the housing programs like Lease to Locals when we come back. So don't miss it.